Okay, let's talk about the warm-up. The last lesson, we talked about horizontal asymptotes. There's three cases. When the exponent on the top is bigger than the exponent on the bottom. So you see this exponent's bigger than this one? When it's big on top, when you have a bot, it's none. So the answer to today's warm-up is none. Now, if these were flipped and x squared minus 3x was on the denominator, this is big on bottom. If it's Bob, it's y equals 0. What if they're the same? It's just whatever numbers are in front. So that would be y equals 1 over 1, which is just 1. That's if they're the same. So those are the three different types of horizontal asymptotes. None, 0, or whatever the coefficients are. Okay, go ahead and flip to the notes. So today we're going to be finding the zeros, which are also called x-intercepts. And we will find the y-intercepts of these rational functions. Okay, so let's start off with what we know. In all cases, you're always going to factor completely. So first, let's factor completely. The numerator is already factored. How do I factor the denominator? Thank you. We're going to divide the denominator by x because each of these have an x. When I divide by x, x goes on the outside. What is left over? Thank you, Akiva. So now I have x times x plus 6. Now it is factored completely. We just did the first part. Now we're going to identify any holes. How do I find out what my holes are? Nope. Yes, exactly. Whatever we cross out. Is there anything that we can cross out? No, those don't match, so we can't cross those out. So guys, is there a hole? No, there's no hole in this case. So I'm just going to put none. And I need you guys to write the reason why so we don't forget. There are no holes because nothing canceled. Nothing canceled out. Okay, now this is the part that is new. We're going to set the numerator equal to 0. So guys, the numerator is right here. That's x minus 2. Set it equal to 0. The last bullet point tells you to solve it. So how do I solve for x? Yep, you add 2 to both sides. So we will get x is 2. That is your 0. We're going to write it as a point. So I'm going to put 2, 0. So guys, a lot of people said this is too much to read. So I just want you guys to write a note on the top of your paper. To find x-intercepts. To find x-intercepts. Set top to 0. That's what you do. Okay? Now let's talk about the y-intercept. We already factored. We said there were no holes. The last thing that we do is plug in 0 for x. So guys, write this down. These are your notes, your shortened notes. To find the y-intercept, plug in zeros. Everywhere you see an x, put a 0 there. So guys, I'm just going to use my original equation. Look what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a 0 here, a 0 here, and a 0 there. What's 0 minus 2? 0 squared, that's just 0. 6 times 0, that's just 0. So this is 0 on the bottom. Can we divide by a 0? Okay, so it's none. Negative 2 over 0 is none. You cannot divide by 0. All right, let's do another example. All right, guys, this is already factored for you. Does anything cancel out? Nothing cancels. We can't go like this because they don't match. Nothing cancels out. So for wholes, we're going to put none. How do I find the x-intercept? Yep, set numerator to 0. I'm going to put set top to 0. So the top is 5x plus 2. Set it equal to 0. We'll solve it. So I'm going to subtract 2. I get 5x equals negative 2. Now what? Yes, good. Divide by 5. So I get x is equal to negative 2/5. So that's my x-intercept. I'm going to put it as a point. Negative, that's supposed to be a 2. Negative 2/5, 0. Y-intercept, what did you write for your notes for y? Yes, plug in zeros. So everywhere where there's an x, I'm going to put a 0. Put a 0 here and a 0 here. What's 5 times 0? Okay, so I'm just left with the 2 on top. 0 plus 1 is 1. So your answer is just 2. Put it as a point. 0, 2. Next. All right, guys, we're going to have to factor here. I'm going to skip this one because this is one of the easier ones. I'm going to let you go back and do this. Let's do this one. Okay, so obviously this is much more complicated than the 2 I just skipped. So I'm going to do this one with you. Okay, guys, factoring is the hardest part. Once you can do that, we're good. Let's look at the top. We get x cubed minus x squared minus 6x. What can all of these be divided by? Yes. So x goes on the outside. These will cancel, those x's. What am I left with? Good. Now that I'm here, we can do an eye chart. Whenever you have a squared and a number, you could do an eye chart. So I want 2 numbers that multiply to negative 6, add to negative 1. That's negative 3 and 2. So this will be, still have an x on the outside, but now I'll put x minus 3 and x plus 2. Okay, so we factored the numerator. Now I'm going to do the denominator. I'm going to do it over here. Guys, what can all 3 of these be divided by? No, negative 3. There we go. So negative 3 is on the outside. What's left? Good. Thank you. Perfect. Good, Jaren. Now I'm going to do an eye chart. So I need 2 numbers that multiply to negative 8, add to negative 2. Thank you, Fu, or Dontrell. Thank you. All right. So let's rewrite this. The negative 3 stays. Don't let it disappear. And that's how I write it. Okay, so we factored both the numerator and the denominator. Factoring is the longest part. Once you got that out the way, it's quick. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite what I have. We had x times x minus 3 over x plus 2. All of that is in the numerator. I just copied this down. And the denominator we said was this. So I'll write that down. Okay, now that we finally canceled, or I'm sorry, now that we finally factored, do you see what cancels out? What does this tell us? Yep, that tells us that there is a whole. How do I find the whole? Yes, whatever we canceled out, set it equal to 0, and now we'll solve. So subtract 2, we get x is negative 2. That is the x value of my whole. Okay. Now, guys, how do I find the y value of that whole? Yep. Plug -2 into the rest of the problem. You guys got it. So I'm going to plug -2 in here, -2 in there, -2 there. Okay, let's work inside of the parentheses first. Let's start inside of the house. What's -2 minus 3? What's -5 times -2? There we go. Good fix. -2 minus 4. -6 times -3. Good. Now, if you just put 10 over 18 and call it a day, you'll get points off. What are we supposed to do? Yes, divide top and bottom by 2. This will be 5/9. So that is the y value of your whole. All right, we're almost done. X-intercepts. What did you guys write for your notes? How do I find the x-intercept? Yep. So guys, we're gonna set the top equal to 0. Guys, what's left over is this. This is what I'm looking at. So I'm gonna set the top, so we don't have to pay attention to this, just the top equal to 0. Set this equal to 0, so I get x equals 0. That's one of them. I'll write it as a point. And I have another one, because we have 2 x's up here, so I'm gonna have 2 x-intercepts. Set x minus 3 equal to 0. So if I do x minus 3 equals 0, what's my answer? Yep, x is 3. So that is your other x-intercept. Write it as a point. Y-intercept. We just plug in zeros. I'm going to take my pen and look at the original problem. Put a 0, a 0, a 0. What's the top? It's a 0. They're all zeros. 0, 0. What's in the denominator? 24 is left. What's 0 divided by 24? 0. So your y-intercept is also 0. All right. Let's go ahead and do the last example, and then you guys can finish. Again, guys, factoring is the hardest part. All right, guys, let's look at number 6. Before I try to do an eye chart, what can both of these be divided by? X, good. So divide them both by x. So x is on the outside. What's left? Yes. Since I have a squared and a number, you will do an eye chart. There's no middle term, so I just put 0. All right, guys, you need to think of 2 numbers that multiply to -9. Exactly. 3 times -3 is -9. 3 minus 3 is 0. So those are my factors. Don't forget x is on the outside. Then you'll write x plus 3 and x minus 3. Okay, guys, so this was the top. I'll put top. Now let's do the denominator. I'll do it in red. What can all these be divided by? 3. So 3 is on the outside. This is what I'm left with. I have a squared and a number, so I'm going to do an eye chart. 2 numbers that multiply to -3, add to -2 is -3 and 1. So I can rewrite my factors as 3 is still on the outside, and I'll write x minus 3 and x plus 1. This is my denominator. I'll just put D for denominator. Okay, so I'm going to write it all together. This is the numerator, all factored out, and this is the denominator, all factored out. Okay, that was the long part, factoring. Okay, do you see what cancels? So what does this mean if they cancel? There's a hole. So let's figure out where the hole is. What we canceled out, equal it to 0 and solve. So add 3, it's just 3. It's always the opposite. So 3. So that is the x value of my hole. Plug in 3 to what is left over. So guys, I'm going to write this nice and pretty so it can all look good. X times x plus 3 and 3x plus 1. This is what's left over after you cross these out. Okay, so now I'm going to plug in 3's. So if I put a 3 here, here, and here, what's 3 plus 3? 6 times 3? 18. Uh-oh. 3 plus 1 times 3 is 12. Now we can divide both top and bottom by 6 to simplify it. It'll be 3 halves. All right, so that's the y value of your hole. Okay. According to our notes, how do you find the x-intercept? Yes, no. Set the top to 0. Okay. Uh-oh. Yes. Okay, so we're going to set the numerators equal to 0. So set this one equal to 0, x equals 0. That is one of your x-intercepts. And we're going to have a second one since we have 2 x's up here. Do x plus 3 equals 0. So subtract 3, you get x is negative 3. Write it as a point, negative 3, 0. All right, guys, we're going to do the y-intercept. Just plug in zeros everywhere. So guys, look, here's the original problem. 0 and 0, what's in the top? Just 0. 0, 0, what's in the bottom? Negative 9. 0 divided by negative 9 is just 0. So that's your y-intercept. All right, flip over to the next page. I just want to show you how some of these will be very quick. Some will be really quick. So let's look at this. This is number 2. You get 4 over x squared minus 3x. Guys, even if you factored this, if you factor it, it'll look like this. They can both be divided by x. Does anything cancel out? Okay, so for holes, nothing cancels, so you'll put none. X-intercept. How do you find the x-intercept? You set the top to 0. The top is 4. If you set it equal to 0, is 4 equal to 0? So it's none, because that made no sense. Y-intercept. How do I find the y-intercept? Plug in zeros. Put a 0 here, a 0 here. What's 0 minus 3 times a 0? Okay, so you get 4 over 0. You cannot divide by 0. So this is also none.